Hello and welcome back to Unwinding Minds. Today we're going to cover self-supervision, what it is and how to utilize it in your own private practice to make you a better therapist or counsellor. The topic covered in today's video applies to both private practice and also to agency work. A word of caution to begin, this episode is aimed at fellow therapists and does not constitute training, and absolutely none of the videos on this channel are designed to train people on how to become a counsellor. Training to be a counsellor is a process that takes several years for very good reasons and could never be summed up on a YouTube video. These videos are meant to help support trainee counsellors and counsellors who are in private practice already, who want to strengthen their existing skills, and those people alone. For this reason, I skip over certain aspects of the process which are vital parts of working properly with a client, such as the techniques utilised. Again, this is not a step-by-step guide on how to offer counselling or how to self-supervise if you want to be a counsellor but have no formal training. I hope that that's well understood, because with all of that said, it's time to dive into the topic at hand. What is self-supervision? How was it developed? I won't linger too long on the history of self-supervision, because I suspect I am far more interested in it than some others will be. I will say that various techniques of self-supervision have evolved over time, and there is no one right way to self-supervise, or one professional who was responsible for developing the techniques I'm going to speak about. An early written example of self-supervision is found in the work of Luttrell, Lee Bourdain, and Lorenz's 1979 developmental framework model, which lists self-supervision as the fourth step of their model. To quote them directly, the basic premise of self-supervision is that the principles of supervision are applied for self-development of clinical skills and professional growth. So this does act as a bit of a beginning definition, but let's simplify that down into plain English, shall we? Self-supervision in counselling is when therapists take a step back and think about their own work, their feelings, and the stuff that they do to get better at their own practice and to grow professionally. It's all about using things like journaling, thinking through cases, and asking ourselves questions, as well as being mindful to make sure that we're practicing ethically and skillfully, even without someone watching over us like they might have done when we were in a classroom. It's a good first line of defense to ensure that we don't get sloppy with our boundaries, with our ethics, or in a technical sense. Because yes, counselling is very technical. Self-supervision is a really important tool to use both when you're feeling well and happy within yourself and your practice, and also when you're struggling. Of course, it's that much more important when you're struggling, because it helps you to remain professional and to maintain strong boundaries, to separate yourself from some of your own feelings and to analyse cases more clinically. This is really important when considering countertransference in a counselling relationship. So how should we self-supervise? As far as a professional skill, you will be well used to stepping outside of yourself as part of your training and doing lots and lots of reflective journaling. Ongoing reflective practice is an important foundation of training, and self-supervision takes it a step further. Unsurprisingly, it involves utilising the kinds of skills that a supervisor might, but using them on yourself. Some self-supervision techniques include the following: journaling and reflective writing, as I mentioned before, session recording and review, role-playing and visualization, mindfulness and self-compassion, case conceptualization, and self-questioning. Creative techniques like art, writing, and metaphors. That's not an exhaustive list, but the technique that we'll be focusing on for this video is case conceptualization. Case conceptualization is basically a method for therapists to break down and get a grip on what their clients are going through, including their symptoms and what kind of help they really need. When we as therapists ask ourselves questions about our work, it helps us to think more deeply about our methods, any personal biases, and how we're tackling different issues as they crop up in the counselling space. The way that I personally recommend doing this falls into 2 steps, which is conceptualizing the case first, and then putting it through an analysis with questions. When I am struggling to work through a block with a client, or I'm finding there is some incongruence beginning to manifest in the relationship, I will write a summary of the client's story. This can help me to better understand the layers of the problems experienced by the client, and in turn makes me a better counsellor for them. Now, I should say, because it bears repeating, that this is simply my personal approach to this, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So don't worry if the way that you work looks very, very different. I start by writing down the age, gender, relationship status, occupation, presenting problem, and any relevant family or medical history of the client, as I work predominantly with disabled or chronically ill clients. I write about them as if I had to explain the way that their problems work to somebody else, like my supervisor. I explain the knock-on effects of a problem. So, for example, client X, let's call her Susie, her struggles began with anxiety when she was 14 after she was cyberbullied online repeatedly for her appearance. This has had a knock-on effect in Susie's life because she continues to feel self-conscious about her appearance with friends and colleagues. And the deficit in confidence from that time means that she now experiences what appears to be social anxiety. During our initial session, she told me she sought counselling to try and figure out ways of connecting with other people. I have used X, Y, or Z techniques so far to support Susie during 8 sessions. I would then go on to talk about the effectiveness of the person-centered techniques that I have used so far in opening up and supporting the client. And I would then put it through the next stage of the process, what I like to call question time. Here are just some examples that might help me to better understand Susie and how best to support her. Remember, this list isn't exhaustive. How does the client view their problem? What are the client's strengths and coping mechanisms? Am I working within my scope of practice and level of competence? What assumptions am I making about the client? How might my own experiences or biases be shaping my interpretation? What emotional reactions do I have towards this client? What has worked well so far? What hasn't? How is the client responding to the interventions? What alternative approaches could I consider? Questions like these are useful as a reflective practice, and you may not need to write them down. Writing things down, however, can help us to see how our answers might change with time, which in the case of long-term clients is really valuable. They can also help me to reflect on what I might need as a counsellor. Might I need more training or more supervision? I would then look at what insights I had gained and whether a different course might need to be charted in order to navigate to dry land together. It's an important part of developing, and astute listeners may have heard in the example of Susie that there is a bit of an incongruence in her reasons for coming and what she would like from counselling sessions. The issue that she laid out first was the cyberbullying, which affected her confidence. But what she has focused on is not how the cyberbullying during her teen years affects her self-esteem and her self-confidence, but instead she's highly focused on trying to connect with others. The lack of the connection is the symptom felt by Susie. She likely feels this most strongly because she feels the absence of others and may or may not be aware that her lowered self-esteem is what's making it challenging to connect with people in the first place. Now, it's important as the therapist here to temper this possible insight with that crucial word, possible. It's my job as the therapist to bring the incongruence into the room that I see and to see what she thinks about that reflection. It may or may not be right, and clients often have very strong instincts around this. Rarely are these instincts wrong in my experience. At the core of working in a person-centered way is listening to that gut instinct that the client has and working with it. There doesn't need to be resistance to it. So that's a little about self-supervision, what it is, and just one of the ways that you can self-supervise. If you found this video useful and would like to hear about other techniques of self-supervision that I mentioned earlier in this video, please do let me know down in the comments section. If you're interested in hearing more and in engaging with fellow practitioners in a meaningful way, you might like to consider joining the waiting list for the peer support group, which can be found on our website. You can find links to that either in the description or by visiting my profile. We will be meeting in an informal supervision group to discuss challenging cases with our peers. The group is going to be open to trainee counsellors as well as fully qualified counsellors, and it's an incredibly helpful forum which helps us to strengthen our ongoing skills, but more importantly will help with the isolation that the field often causes. I really hope that you can join us there. Until then, thank you so much for watching and take really good care.